I feel like you kind of know me now. Magnets, video, cotton, bleach.
Hey.
You really do know me. Okay, so althea and jurell.
You got
Tiger.
it.
Wow, you guys got it. Nice. Do you guys want to like take a second, introduce yourselves individually or like collectively?
That sounds good.
Yeah, Jurell, you want to go first?
Okay. I can go first. My name is Jurell. I grew up here in Eugene, Oregon, and I met Althea within the last couple of years at the tail end of what I learned was my, how do you say?
Saturn returns.
My Saturn return, and an old
So
head.
you're 28-ish?
Well, I'm 31 now.
31 now. But
And
you
I
were.
was I was finishing that up
Coming
when
out.
I was coming out of it when I met
Of it.
Althea.
No, I'm kidding.
Right.
Ayo.
Right. So, as some of the old heads would say, it was a matter of, making it through and holding on to my sense of self, my dignity.
What is the sense of self? It's funny. It's something I've pushed against my entire life is that I don't think there is like a deeper me in there. I really think that the only me is one that goes toward pleasure and away from pain. And like it could be longer term, but I'm not like, I'm a creative person. I need to cherish that part of me, or like there's no part of me that I feel like I need to cherish other than like in the very moment, like like base needs and desires.
Okay, can I ask you a question about that though?
Yeah, go for it. And you don't have to lean in just for comfort. The goal of the
Okay,
podcast is to
okay.
be comfortable. I'll make the audio work.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll just put it like right there.
Okay.
Perfect.
Do you feel like you stay with yourself? Like, do you leave yourself behind? Do you know what I mean?
I don't even know how to start understanding that question.
Okay, like, I don't know. Do you do things you don't want to do to please other people? Do you like? So the impression I get of you is that you're a pretty congruent person.
I've always wanted people to give impressions of each other, like first meeting people. So that's great. Even if it's not good, feel free to like be like. And you have this high pitched annoying that like you can go for it, like.
But no, I mean, you seem like a person that you stay with yourself. Like you're pretty congruent. Like what's happening inside matches what's happening outside. What you say is happening is what's happening for you.
The funniest timing is I just wasn't congruent for 45 minutes of an episode, like a podcast where I'm just like,
right.
This was kind of a mistake. And normally like in terms of polite, like niceties, I'm just like, none of those matter. But I'm like, someone came over to the house, like, and like sometimes like 30 minutes in, people can really get into a flow. So I was like, I gave it time, but by the end, I'm like, man, so not always, but 99% of the time, I'd say, yeah.
So I guess at least like in my experience, I think the concept of a self ends up being a lot more important for people who spend periods of their life, especially their earlier life, not being true to themselves, like learning how to perform or like live for somebody else and then having to be like, oh, who am I? What do I actually want? That's where the question of self becomes relevant. But it seems like you're somebody that's kind of been yourself your whole life. And so there's not...
I've always begrudgingly had to hide parts of myself, such as the fact that it's dipped for 3 nights in a row. Or like currently I've just been openly talking like because of all this, I did well, like the work I was getting paid well, and then stocks I made money, but now I spent every dollar. I spent $24,000 on clothes.
Yeah.
Another $1,000 just on bleach. I'm like, it's not like I lost that. I have it. I can
You've
touch it.
invested it.
For the first time ever, I can actually tangibly touch my investment. Where I'm like, when I had money in stocks, I'm just like, because earlier in life, when I was in college, I had lost money in stocks, and I was like, having nothing to show for it is so like almost painful.
Right.
To just like, it's
Especially when you're taking risks.
yeah. And it's just like, I mean, in today's like kind of this age range, you have to take risks if you want any real sort of chance at stability, house, any sort of like future.
Yeah.
So,
Which makes me consider holding on to myself or maintaining my dignity is a matter of recognizing like, oh, okay, there was a point in life where I wasn't running away from shame or hiding my tail from guilt. Like I could face the consequences of my own actions as well as the uncertainty of the future with the same amount of gusto.
those are my 2 least favorite things. Like honest to God, the uncertainty, if I could just get rid of that, nobody has to deal with that anymore. Like, I mean, I guess certainty of future, then it'd be kind of boring. Or like not boring, but like,
Right.
If you didn't like what was coming, if like you're going to get in a car crash tomorrow, it's like, fuck this.
But I think excitement or the the unknown creates a sense of excitement, interest, anticipation, which I think has a pretty big impact on how we approach what comes next.
Yeah, it's definitely energizing, I would say. And
Yeah.
like I don't know, I wouldn't like to say I'm like fear based. I'm one last change I'm gonna make. I'm just gonna try plugging it in. Okay, if you
Cool.
talk one more time, I'm curious if that made it louder at all.
Yeah. Is that working?
It was working before too,
Yeah.
but more or less I'm just like it was like it was perfect. More or less I'm just like that looks it clicked. We're good.
Cool.
Gucci.
So who are you?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Whoa.
Are you?
The
Did you
stranger
say
talking.
everything that you needed about?
Hey,
who
we've
you are?
heard plenty about him. He's a whole person.
Jurell's a whole person. That's so true. I'm Althea. Let's see.
Take a lot of altheanine. No, I'm kidding. Have you ever introduced
Not
yourself?
too much, but some. Let's see. Who am I? I am a person. I'm a creative person. I'm a squirrely person. Passionate.
Like you tuck stuff away for winter, or like do you like
Oh, yeah.
squirrely in the sense of like
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, squirrely in a lot of ways, but yes, that is a true
squirrely driver. I've never heard someone
not
described
so
as
much.
squirrely, so just
No,
having that be a thing, I'm curious.
I think of it like squirrel brained, squirrel natured. So yes, the like tuck things away, seasonally minded in that sense, but also easily distracted. I'll glitch out.
Glitch out?
Like,
I've never, and it's funny
Yeah.
to like meet people who have like, you have different terminology. A lot of people don't have their own
Totally.
terminology. You two have developed terminology, so it's
Yeah.
fascinating to just like, I just want to often just like ask about it if you can.
yeah.
What something Althea will do in terms of squirrel braining is have multiple pots cooking at once, and when I mean pots is projects, chores, activities.
Okay, I'm
And-
squirrel brained. By
and
that
so-
logic. Sometimes I'll just have be carrying things from 3 different things because
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I'll hit that and then that and then that.
Right.
Kind of like that,
Yes.
where it's like, yeah.
Yes.
It's very much
Task
a
switching
mad
works for you,
scientist
sort of thing.
So it's more like I get into different modes, and it's not even about what task I'm focused on. Like, it's not a thing where so I'll have like 3 projects that I'm working on at the same time. So for example, today I was working on, I had to do a continuing education log for my investigator license renewal. So like going back and remembering all of the things that I've done that qualify as continuing education. And then I was also like working on flyers for a workshop we're doing this weekend. Like,
Do you have like 10, 20-minute like pauses that like, because that's the annoying thing is like.
no,
vid-
I
vid-
just I end up just switching back and forth between the things that I'm doing, and I kind of so like I'll use a whiteboard at home. I've got this little whiteboard that's maybe like 4 by 6 inches, and it's on a little canvas, or like a
Triangle?
yeah, like a stand. And so I'll use that where I'll lock in and I'll be like, okay, what are the 3 things that I'm focused on for the next like hour or 2, right? And so I'll write those on the whiteboard, and that might be I need to feed myself, I need to get paperwork done, and then I need to schedule some phone calls. And so I don't decide necessarily, like I don't try to hold myself to what is the one thing that you're going to do right now. It's these are the things you can.
But you were
be playing
sometimes
with.
encapsulated for like long periods of time?
For sure, for
Totally.
sure.
Okay, I'm scrolling.
Yeah,
Boom, bingo.
but then I can like jump over. Like I'll find myself in the kitchen, and then I'll be like, oh, I haven't eaten, and that's on my list. I should do that right now.
Totally.
And then I'll do that.
Do you ever tell him like, okay, yeah, I'll be just a minute, or like I'll be able to like leave to go do something, and then it's like, unless he stops you, it's like an hour could go by because he keeps
yeah.
being like, yeah, it's the next thing on the list, but your list because it's multifaceted, it's like you're kind of doing them all. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. It's funny that we're like cross in a way of
No,
like
totally.
Yeah,
Totally.
We do a good job of complementing each other and not taking away from the dignity of recognizing our own responsibility and like, oh, I have to be actively involved in taking care of myself. So there's no point where I'm doting over Althea or telling her like, you need to go and eat today. Like there's definite points where I feed myself and then I prepare an additional amount of food and say, hey, I made you some food, and she'll eat it at some point, but it's like,
It's interesting being on just completely different like wavelengths at times. Do you two work together or separately?
well, I suppose when it comes to the stickers in the field, we work together, but our collaboration tends to be kind of a taking turns.
Yeah. So like we each have our own day jobs, but then we run. Well, I I run the like back end side of our business, so Disobedient Goods, and then Jurell's kind of the sales lead. He's great with people, and we did Whitaker Market all season, and he, just knocked it out of the park.
And
Baller.
that's just essentially like being able to present who we are and what we're doing and have a message with, a smile, like showing up and being ready to be here as opposed to just like, here's what we've got. And a lot of times it's like really difficult to show up with, a product and then be confident that it's going to make people happy.
Oh my God. That
Yeah.
I almost to the side asked Kenzie, like, can we leave the graduate before anyone came in? Because I didn't bring my favorite pieces. Like, I'm confident in my favorite pieces that I'm like, oh my God, these are like insane. Like, I don't know if I brought any double layers for you. Like,
You did, yeah.
I did?
It's so good.
I'm really confident in these,
Yeah.
but then I'm just like, I brought like a bunch of the mids where it's just,
Uh-huh.
I'm like, I don't know what people are used to, because I'm like, I am in my own world in terms of like clothing here.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I don't know what like most people like wear or are used to. But then it was received really well. So I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
It made me feel really good. And I'm like, now I'm open to going and selling, which is good because it's like I'm bursting at the seams essentially in here. And if I go to my UPS app, it's like 6 shipments are here coming. One's 40 pounds, one's 15 pounds, one's 22 pounds. And it's just like,
Damn.
I want to weigh it all.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that I'm really grateful for with the stickers that we make is that the materials themselves are not super burdensome. Yeah. Yeah. Like both cost-wise, but also space-wise.
But mentally, does it take up space to know you have? Because I'm like, tech was always that for me, where I'm like, that's so great, I can shut my laptop. But I'm like, mentally, at a certain point, I realized I'm like, it takes up a certain amount of storage in my brain to have an SD card, a 2 terabyte SD card full of stuff that I care about. I don't want to lose it. It's just like, and we were talking to video editors. So Kenzie and I met a couple that have been together for 8 years like us and have been in the industry for 3 years. Like, it's like
Cool.
identical.
Cool.
And I was asking him his like workflow, and he keeps the projects forever. I'm like, I delete them. He's like, I don't think anyone does that. I'm like, I need that off my plate. I'm like, client's done. Okay, like you have like safety copies, like one without music.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm just like, delete. Just like get it off, because I'm like, I feel overburdened with things I should be doing, things to like just. I'm overstimulated by the amount of like reality occurring, like in terms of like there's a lot going on.
I feel that as
Totally.
well. I feel that as well, but the way that the stickers came about and the way this business came about was really like out of my own recovery and like workaholism recovery. So my day job is in the criminal defense world, and it's so heavy and kind of that burdensome of like so easy to wake up thinking about it and like not be able to, and it just used to
joyfully
be where,
thinking about it, or it seems like not really a joyful. I mean, probably
there's
hopeful.
I mean, there are ways in which it's joyful, but it's also simultaneously painful and like full of grief. And I mean, you're like,
So you love your job.
I do love my job. I do love,
That's
I mean,
beautiful. At the end of the day, that's beautiful.
Yeah. I love the work that I do, and I love the power that I have to do something about things that I don't think should be happening.
I don't feel very. I mean, like I'm very much tend to the part of the garden I can touch person, especially in terms of like larger like. But that's why I'm like I voted for Kanye in 2020. That's why I bought the 2020 Vision hoodie. I'm like very much so. I'm just like I have no space to be like the greater world needs to change before my personal happiness. Like I'm just like I feel definitely like powerless whatsoever. So I'm like it probably is like it must feel good to be having an impact.
Definitely. And I think there was a point where I discovered how much of an impact that I could have if I just took on more, that I did that so hard that I really stopped taking care of myself, and I wasn't actually, I wasn't well anymore with my own self, and you can't work like that, so
You make it a surprisingly long time. I'm just on a year
absolutely.
of,
I mean, I did it for 7.5 years before
I have 6
crashed.
more years. I have
Yeah.
6 more years.
Yeah.
How hard's the crash?
It was pretty brutal. It was pretty brutal, to be honest, and it took a solid 2 years.
So stop at 5 years. Stop a year
no,
early.
for real, I would, but also like try to take care of yourself, because it also does take a toll, and like, I mean, my skin has changed, my like so many like physiological things have changed for me,
Yeah.
and there are ways you can recover, and
I just
and
feel
also
yeah,
I
it'd
don't
take
know,
a
takes
bigger
a
toll
toll.
for me to be like, I never tested my potential. I never
Mm-hmm.
tried. I never like, so I'm like, obviously I'm pushing it like really, really far and hard. I'm like, it's
Yeah.
funny. I was like, I still think to this day, I'm like, I wouldn't consider myself a clothing designer or anything like that. I'm just like, I really like, this happened just by me ordering my own like wardrobe.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that piece, I'm a comfort researcher. I'm kind of fully like understanding that I'm really just delving into like, what is comfort, and like, why does a certain thing that you wear bring you joy sometimes, and other times it's like malaise of just like, oh, I'm thinking about it, or like,
yeah,
and I'm like, man, and then hopefully I'll bring that to like, the world around me. But
yeah.
I don't know. Do you think if you stopped a year, or like, I don't know, I couldn't imagine doing this for 7 years. 1 year in, and I'm just like, I definitely am feeling it around the edges of just like, man, if I could sleep for about a month straight, I would feel very nice.
Yeah, yeah. And I did. Like, I was on paid leave for a year.
Oh, nice.
And so, yeah, I basically spent a year being angry and sleeping and feeling guilty about not working. And,
Oh, because you still were like, I could be having an impact.
oh, yeah. I mean, it really was, it was a detox of the lifestyle that I had been living, in terms of just, like, running on adrenaline. Just kind of
It fuels you in a different way of just like, oh, I'm doing things. Yeah, so you stopped and just essentially started being like, okay, Althea first.
Yeah.
Which you have to. You obviously,
Right,
not
like,
even in
yeah,
like
no,
a yourself.
like, right, like,
Yeah.
oh, we have to eat today. When you have to go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom. Like, don't wait an hour until you're gonna pee your pants, kind of thing, you know?
That happens with the video editing too, like to the dot, where I'm just
Yeah.
like, one more one more change, and
Yeah.
it can really go like 20, 30 minutes sometimes, and I'm just like, I should have stopped 30 minutes ago.
No, absolutely. And I think for me, it's about respecting myself and recognizing what respect looks like if I'm not just about productivity. Like, if I treat myself as the animal that I am, and not just like a little boss bitch, and that's kind of what I was doing for a long time.
Yeah, that's a lot of thoughts. I'm curious your take on all this, because you were with her for this time, or you met her at the end of it. Like, I mean, like,
Yeah.
where did the burnout happen in terms of like the part, like more or less?
Yeah,
I'm
it was
like,
like
that's my biggest
a
thought.
year and a half after, year and a half, almost 2 years.
You've been together. You were together when you had like the big fallout of your energy.
No, we met about 2 years after my breakdown. So like, we were both coming out of pretty intense times.
What does breakdown look like? Just like camp
Like,
footage.
well, it was
What's the
like,
day or
so I don't know if you've like dealt with depression in your life at all, but it's something that I've struggled with since I was a pretty little kid, and it was this thing where I was like, I'm not depressed, but I'm in need of deep rest, and
Jim Carrey.
yeah, and if I don't, like, basically it was like my brain being like, you have to stop, and like, it wasn't that I actually like wanted to die, but I had caused like such a level of distress for myself that it was like, if you
Wouldn't
don't
that be an
stop,
easy way out?
yeah, no, exactly. And so
Yeah.
it was like,
Just
I would
that would
hit,
wrap up I think Seinfeld
Yeah.
has a quote on that. He looks over his balcony every day and he's like, that would make my to-do list go to 0.
right, no,
Yeah.
and it was pretty much like that. Like, I would hit about 5 o'clock, and it was just like suicidal ideation would kick in. But again, it wasn't that I was like depressed. It wasn't that I didn't want to be alive. It was like I had far, far, far exceeded my own capacity to like
You start
be
thinking of
there
all the
for
things
other
you need to do
people.
to start recapturing, and just like, it's just an immediate like, wouldn't that be nice if I could just like, it's essentially go on vacation. Like, can I just not deal with all that?
No, exactly.
It's interesting that
Exactly.
people aren't supposed to talk about like suicidal ideation, like much
Right.
like I'm like talking about debt and talking about sleeplessness. I'm like, people, like, if someone has like, I'm like is thinking about it, I'm like, not talking about it seems like the worst possible thing. It's just fascinating.
absolutely.
The amount of things in society where it's like, don't talk about that. And lately, talking about it openly there's like, until I started doing it, there's like this internal like suspicious. I'm like, what are people gonna do? Be like dislike me? And it's like
Right,
people aren't just
right.
like, oh, get away from me, poor. People are just like, okay, you're the same person, but just fascinating choices. And I'm like, I know, I don't know why I made them, but
Yeah.
life is a trance sometimes. And good, you gotta be in a trance to go. You gotta be on a train to go somewhere. I'm still
It's
developing.
true. It's true. Yeah.
So going back, what changes would you? And then I feel like you're boxed out. Like, I mean, jump in here, man. Interrupt. Feel free to interrupt me. Seriously.
I felt like I didn't have anything to say. Well, I came from a very different place than Althea, and so coming out of, I guess the lack of a better term, my own sense of inadequacies, where I was going
Short.
to work every
I'm
day.
kidding.
Well, going to work every day and trying to please a manager or a boss, thinking that somehow a corporate job at 55 hours a week is going to, make me the money I need or make me happy, and burning myself out. And that's really the
For
most,
someone else too.
right? And not
Yeah.
even somebody that I make breakfast for in the morning, or somebody
Yeah.
that I spend any of my actual free time with, like somebody I don't care about, and I'm kissing ass. And I recognize that in that same way, I'm coming in and I'm meeting Althea, who has a whole nother life of experience helping people and living outside of herself. And so it was a really good contrast in recognizing, like, I've been spending all of this time thinking that I'm living for myself, but I'm really not even helping anybody around me. And then I'm meeting someone who's really quite lovely, who's spent all of herself helping other people, and then not having enough in the end of the day to keep herself whole. And so it was a matter of, recognizing we can do all of this work to get people out of a real prison cell, and yet we still live in mental prisons all of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. There would be, obviously, I'm saying this in a way of, I'm like, obviously, it's like The Office is like, obviously, people are better off not in prison, but it's like, there'd be something freeing about just being like just having to let go of the concept of I should be working, or else I'm just like, essentially, like, it's essentially the idea that, like, yeah, it would be fulfilling if I was successful, whatever that term means.
No, right.
So if you're in prison, it's essentially like, you can't really proceed that way, and it's just kind of like, to be like, obviously, I'm like,
Well, you still can, though, because there are lots of different lives you can live in prison.
God, so I can never escape it? No, I'm kidding.
No, I mean, no, that's kind of the thing is like, and I think it works both ways. Like, I have, lots of community and former clients who thought that, like, getting out of prison would be freedom. And then they get out of prison and they're like, okay, obviously this is better than being in prison. And also, this is really painful and this is really hard. And I'm still stuck in certain ways. And then, okay, what's the next layer? Like, what's the next uncovering? And I think we're all kind of always doing that in some sense, but just the discovery that, like, we create confinement for ourselves in a lot of different ways. And it's
I'm
not
curious
just about other people.
what a couple ways would be, because like I like the idea, but I don't understand it.
Well, I think, like Jurell was talking about, like, working for somebody else that you don't actually care about, but somehow you've, like, tied your life and your ego and your existence to, this is what I do, but I'm so miserable working for this person and I don't respect them and I don't care about them and the work doesn't matter to me.
Were they really good at praising, like, occasionally, or like was it a system, like, if it wasn't like a different person would then have never formed?
No, I think for the point in time at which I was at, I had quite literally snagged myself a job where I was able to show up every day for work and perform the tasks that got my job done and got me praise around, and like in a circumferential sort of way. So like all of the people I worked around seemed to really,
It's like,
I get
he's the
along
man.
with them. Yeah, I get along with all
who
these
doesn't
people.
want to feel like, I mean, that's a
Right.
sense of community of like, oh, cool, and you're doing good for the community. It's like, we
Right.
don't have that anymore. We have
Right,
not
right,
only,
right.
like, no religion, no community, no culture, no nothing, hardly even family anymore, no friend group, unless there's like we have nothing. So having the, even at work, would be better. Like, I could imagine just tasting that and just being like, more, please.
No, and it really felt like that with like the community of people I was working with. and then you start to like zoom out on the larger scale of like, okay, but we're really showing up and we're working for a really unorganized structure where a lot of us are underpaid. A lot of us have been here for a long time and we're not getting, the respect that we deserve. And yet at the same exact time, if I stop showing up here, I mean, I have to start off at ground zero again anyway. So is it even worth it to leave?
Jesus, what a tricky spot that is to be in.
It is. And
Was he out?
I was a single man at the time, and so getting to know people who have children and have families and are working for 50, 25 cents less than me, and I'm like, I don't even make any money.
I think my situation's messed up. I feel like we should fix it. Now we should actually fix this. Like, that's
right.
crazy.
It feels like
because they're
real
leaving
cudgel.
their kid to go do that too. Like, yeah, and they're paying someone. Like, that's a
Right.
It's a mess of a system.
And working a job that feels, useless or monotonously stupid until every other Friday comes and it's like, well, at least we're not on the street.
Have you heard the saying? It's like there's two great addictions in life: heroin and a monthly salary. It really is good.
No, it's true.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I think that's it's a perfect example of the idea that we can create our own confinement. And because then thinking about like, okay, if we're then putting things on credit cards and we're like living our life forward as our economy and our culture encourages us to do, then you have to like get on the wheel to keep it moving so you can pay the bills, so you can still have the stuff that you want and keep the accumulation, all that stuff going. And so like I think figuring out how do I break free of that, right? Like, so there's
I'm not going to sell the clothes. So lay off that option. There might be.
No, but it is
because I'm right there with I'm there right
Yeah.
now. As I'm like, for the first time, I opened up a 0% for 12 months credit card. I'm like, let's just take $5,000 and put it there for a year and just let's just touch that in a year. And I'm like, with video work, it's doable, but it's just like, man, B2B, like it's just essentially a whole host of things. But I'm like, I have faith that
it kicks things into action.
Yeah,
and
which
then
is
you
there's
have
a
to keep
good
up with them.
there's a goodness to that. Of
There
like,
absolutely is, and I think then it's just about can I sustain this, and can I honestly catch myself and shift gears before I run out of steam. And I think that's where I ran into in the past for myself, was realizing like, oh, I cannot sustain what I am doing. What now? And for me, it was just like, take my hands off the reins and just let it go.
Because for you were quite literally pursuing fulfilling work and work that was meaningful not just to yourself but the people that you were impacting or the people that you were working with. And comparatively to my experience growing up, I felt that in order for me to be somebody who was worth giving out or being available for other people, I had to constantly be putting and making work and effort on making myself better. So it was like a constant building up and a facade.
It is still in the attempt to do other people ultimately. Or, when you say I have to do this for myself to be able, it's like that's because I mean we talked about I think empathy is evil, like being the grounding of this all of them. Like making someone happy does nothing for me, but like knowing that.
But is that what empathy is? Making somebody else happy?
No, but essentially I'm like, I don't want to make someone mad. I hate being in the room with someone mad because I think empathy is inevitable.
But how? I don't know. I still
if I start screaming right now, like you don't have the choice to be like affected for the negative. You're just like, that would just kill the vibe. Like your mood, your day even potentially could be ruined because of someone else's emotional valence. Is like, whoa. And it's like sadness can also drag you. And it's like, so we're walking around in the world full of people who are angry and sad. It's like the fact that the society is telling you should really be more emotionally receptive to those around you. It's like, I cannot be dragged. I can hardly stay. Like, I'm chugging. I'm like, if I stop for a second, I'm like, I'll drown. I got to keep going. Like, like essentially.
So
does
it feel to you like
I'll give people a shirt or something, but I'm like,
does it feel like you have a low tolerance for witnessing other people's suffering? Like that it, like it, the
I
way
don't
that
want
it brings
people
you
to
down?
suffer. If they think me suffering with them will help at all. If there's like
So like commiseration is not something that you're...
commiseration and joy, that's the whole thing. That's the whole part of empathy that never gets done, is like when something really good happens to you, don't you kind of feel like you can't really share it with everyone in your life? Because some people will be like, oh, that's an opportunity I could have had, even like they're in a different... Like,
I don't really have that with anybody in my life.
that's great. I think it is like, and I'm very, very lucky to actually have like a handful of people. I started the group chat of 30 people. They don't all know each other, but like I'm like, I really like them all. Like they're like people, like they're like good people. And I just start sharing it there because I'm like, it's anonymous enough. Whereas like, I'm like, I don't know, like socially in society today, like bragging, or like not even bragging, but just being, imagine you secured like a place where you like your job and you're getting paid 120K or like something. Like it's not something you'd really tell people, because it would not, like they wouldn't be like, I am so fucking happy for you.
I mean,
I think the devil is in the details.
Yeah.
I think that in the same way that people say, oh, misery loves company. Well, I think my enjoyment of life requires company as well. And so if I don't have specifically anyone else to reverberate my experiences off of, it becomes quite literally a cycle of my own storytelling. And
which
so
is a powerful place, like potentially.
it potentially can be, but then you have to really think about how disciplined and how focused am I on, what am I focused on?
Discipline, yeah. I want to touch back on that later, the concept of discipline.
Sure. So considering being emotionally available for other people is always a choice for me. I'm not looking to connect with every single person that I come into contact with, but remaining centered and open is, I think, in just in the most general sense that I can think of. Like if I had a karate stance, I could have, an offensive attack position, and I could have a defensive position, and I'm trying to approach life and like I'm ready, but I'm not like closed off to opportunities.
So let's just flip it. Imagine she's having like one of the best days. Everything's going really well. You're having like a really melancholy, like kind of sour day. Like and when I'm in that position, I realize that I'm like, it's often time based or like physical, like reality based, or like something can happen. Like, oh, cool, this person, like this, something actually good is happening and it's over. I'm like, I don't want to damper someone just because I'm in that space. Cause I'm like, and then the flipping it back is I'm like, well, when I'm in that space, I'm like, I don't want to be like, I'll do my best being in this space to make it so like, like you don't have to be in that space. But I'm just like, when I think of just like progress toward getting out of that space, like what happens with commiseration, I might not understand the word commiseration. Does that just mean like it's happy or sad?
No,
it just means talking with people?
Co-commiseration, so misery.
Okay, so
basically
it is
it's misery loves
okay.
company. So it's literally I'm having a bad day. Talk with me about your bad day too. Mm-hmm. And it's the like together we shall
be sad together. At least I'm not alone in sadness, which is fine.
Or not even quite like that. Just even simply somebody's in your peripheries or in the same space, occupying the same space, and you can't help, or that person can't help but spill their suffering onto you. Like, oh, you're a part of this, and you might not even have anything to do with it. And so recognizing that, like, one, you can be in the room with somebody that's suffering and not take it personally.
Totally. Oh, yeah. No, it wouldn't be personal.
And then two, also recognizing that, like, okay, if I'm experiencing, a shitty disposition or I'm uncomfortable, I don't have to make that other people's problem. Mm-hmm. I can still tell them that, like, hey, I'm telling you this so you can acknowledge that I'm not in the greatest of moods right now, or I'm kind of
totally. That's
up.
A massive benefit of just
right.
like, letting people know it's like, hey, like checking in on
right.
Me. I'm not receptive to like wanting, planning like.
Yeah, and growing up, I think, is a process of recognizing in my own self moments where I need to be taken care of, and no one is going to take care of me better than myself. And I'm not, and a lot of times it starts with me not taking notice of signs or symptoms.
Discipline. Yeah. Bring it back to that. So I would say that I am not like, I don't have grit or discipline or anything, but I would say that I have faith, and I would say that that has been like my pillar of like, I'm like, I think when I am like saddest in life, or like, is just because there's like a slight lack of like a loss of faith of like that, like if I'm like working towards something that I really believe is good, positive, and I'm putting energy, I'm like, it will have like, it will like create a better future. Is just like, then I don't have to be disciplined for me. But I'm like, for me, I can't be disciplined to do something that I don't already feel energized towards because I have enough faith to drive it. Totally. Would be kind of the way that I think about it. So I'm like, I don't know. Discipline's a fascinating concept. I'm like, how does discipline play into it if you're not already energized enough to do it? Like, can you just tell yourself like, no, you just do this, like logicless, or like?
It's really a progression and a building of trust. I think of like metaphorically, if I was playing against myself, or if I was playing tennis against myself, objectively, I don't want the game to end like win or lose because I'm playing me at the end of the day the whole time. I just want the game to be as strongly as competitive as I can handle it. I've never played
tennis, so this analogy is falling flat for me.
Pong or table tennis, or like,
I've played it against other people. I don't think I've ever played it. Like, I'm like, I've never, I can't get in the headset of playing against myself because I'd set it down and be like, this isn't going to make me money in the future. I've got to do something.
Right. And it's really like a matter of catching a rhythm against your own thoughts, against your own practices, actions. And so objectively, I can't beat myself. And if I tell myself I'm losing all of the time, then that's also an energy or an output that I'm putting into the world. So I really think of it as...
And so being around one of those people, for example, to bring it back, it's that can be like an experience that you want less of in life. Like, if it isn't your partner, I'm saying it's, even if it was like maybe a friend who you've had for a couple of years, and it is like really sad if they're going into like a depressive episode or something, but it's like drowning. It's like you don't just swim up to someone who's drowning. You'll drown too.
I do. I think
you just go swimming up to people, or like
yeah. I mean, proverbially, yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, it's one of the skills that I've built. Like, I think you can develop personal boundaries, and that really helps with the impact that others have on your energy. Because certainly, like, I think of it as going to the dungeon. And when you're going to the dungeon, what are you going to bring with you? Like, you're going to bring a lantern. Snacks. For sure. Yeah, you're probably going to put some snacks in your pocket. Definitely. Yeah, you're going to have a lantern.
And one other thing, I'm going to actually be back in 10 seconds.
Cool.
I'll be able to hear you.
Okay. And you're going to be wearing shoes, considering that the ground is going to be grimy and wet and cold, right? So when you're like, if you know that somebody in your life, particularly somebody that you care about or you feel like committed to having in your life, if you know they're having a hard time, like, thinking about how can I prepare, or like, what can I expect in the face of this? And so, like, one of the parts of my job this year was somebody I've worked with for a really long time who relapsed. Incarcerated and relapsed, and ended up in solitary confinement at one of just the hellhole prisons that we've got way out east. And like, everything fell apart in this person's life. And so part of my job was once a week talk to this person in solitary confinement.
So like, is it like 23 in one set of like or like, if it's solitary confinement, it more or less is like, I don't understand the system. I'm not saying it's a contradiction. More or less, I'm like, how does it work? Of like, if it's solitary, how do you get to interact with them?
Because the concept of solitary confinement is that the housing unit that they're in is, like you said, 23 in 1 for the most part. And so because I work in the legal field, because it's a legal privilege that they have to talk to their like legal team. Yeah. Cool. So they can't, like, the state can't say, no, you are in trouble.
Could you hang out with your lawyer like 5 hours a day?
No.
So there's limits.
There's definitely limits, yeah.
And I only know about this because of Larry Hoover, because of Kanye's work to try to get him out of 23 in 1, because it's just like, that's inhumane. And it's, it's a fascinating concept. And then people give him hell for going and talking to Trump, and it's like he went there to try to get
Right.
that kind of system it's a fascinating field.
Yeah.
And at the end of it all, I'm just like, oh, it's just a mess.
No, it is. It is.
It
But
is
you can
nice.
also, like, it's happening, right? And I think for me, with, like, this whole concept of empathy being evil, or that, like, you don't want people to bring you down, it's like, okay, but, like, is it possible that I don't have to be brought down, but I can still show up if I'm prepared? And, like, I would think about it
Is
the
that
same
possible?
way.
I would-
Totally. Yeah.
Reliably, in a way.
Absolutely.
Really,
Yeah.
I challenge Scrabble challenge of just I'm just like if I really just started like listing off on like the fact that I just don't even want it. It's funny, so, like it's deep to my core. I'm like, don't bring others down. Like that's like one of the tenets is I'm like, unless there's a reason to, like, don't say all the
But I
negative
think
things that are
that's-
going on. Like I said, yeah.
But I think that's part of it, is unless there's a reason to. And there's a lot of injustice that's happening in the world. And there's a lot of circumstances that people are facing that causes pain and suffering that they don't necessarily see a way to get out of. And I think that the power of communing with another person when you're in dire straits is that they, especially if they're not, the power of somebody else's positive energy can actually kick you in a different direction.
Totally.
And like somebody listening and not commiserating, right? So like so much of the time I'm talking to somebody who's like really in one of the most desperate, hellish situations of their existence, right? And to be able to listen to them talk about whatever they need to say and be like, yeah, sucks. And not have to like get into fixing it, not have to get into like, oh, me too, but just letting somebody bring what they've got. It's a relief. Like it's a relief for people to do that. And that oftentimes it's like, oh, wow, I was able to voice that and I'm heard and now I'm feeling and now I'm moving through this moment, and what now?
I could see that. When I'm at my lowest, I want help or to not have people talk about it. Like talking about it, like being seen or heard from someone. Like it's just almost it feels like like I'm like I just it's, and I just might be wired differently than some people in that
Totally,
system.
yeah.
So I assume everyone else obviously has the same sort of like reward systems as me. Yeah, it's really fascinating concept of just essentially loving everyone else like you want to be, like, you know.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
And it's that is what it is at the most basic level.
Yep.
And having skills, literally skills to recognize when and how to show up for people, and noticing that, you know, having regard for somebody else doesn't mean I'm putting my guard down, or it doesn't mean that I'm leaving myself vulnerable for attack.
I mean, just the whole like the 5-monkey thing of like who you spend time with changes you. I'm just thinking the day in and day out of someone who like they're like, I just know some pessimistic people. I've known some people who it's not just a phase or a depressive episode. Like some
Totally.
people fundamentally will not be happy until the world changes. And they make it abundantly clear. I mean, even though I don't see them anymore, it's like if I occasionally see their Instagram story, I'm like still fighting the fight. It's just, I'm like, my mental well-being would be nothing if I cared about everything that much, you know?
Yeah.
It's just essentially just like, I can't think of the fact of that half of us, like people our age, are going to die of cancer because there's so much plastic. Can't think of that.
Right.
And that's just one of many. And it's just like
Right.
being around someone who's making that abundantly clear and just like saying, "Gee, what's the point in trying?" Because
Well, I
honest to
think-
God, when you start thinking of that, what the fuck is the point? We
I
can't have kids. We can't buy a house. We're like,
but
it's
here's the thing: is
really
like,
easy to let go
I
if someone starts
control-
that.
I control very little, and I have great power. Like that's the thing, is that I don't, and so there's like the discipline piece.
I like that. I control very little and I have great power.
Yeah, like there's the discipline piece, but there's also recognition of like what is true and what is real and what I can do. And I think we're so oriented, like not just in overconsumption with stuff, but overconsumption in doing.
No, I'm kidding.
Oh, no, I mean,
No,
and,
no,
and
fucking with you.
I'm right
really,
there with you. Like
no.
your
This
stuff
is
room
me fighting
more
plastic.
organized.
I'm like so
Yeah.
like I'm like any. Oh.
No, I mean, we're right there with you. We love it. We love it. But I mean, that's exactly it, is that you actually are doing something, right? Like you have a vision, and your vision isn't just about opposing something. It's actually about doing something in the face of it. Right. And so I would say that like, that is you wielding the power that you have. And no, you're not going to single-handedly change the plastics industry, and also you have the power, and you actively are. Like I'm wearing one of your sweatshirts right now. Like you have the power to influence other people and to inspire other people and to energize other people, and on and on and on, right? And we all do. And when we find our passions, right? When we find like what we are about, and when we like say yes to that like internal fire and that like internal drive, I think that's when we find ourselves in our power. But
the way you're talking right now is energizing in a very positive light. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but there's also like, whereas you are expressing that like at your core you have a no for like being brought down, like putting yourself in a situation to be brought down by other people. I'm very different in that, like, it's not to say I can't be brought down by other people, but that like I've practiced and like I have discipline around my own kind of regulation in the way I take other people's stuff on. And it's not that I've like always had great boundaries around it, but for me, I've learned, and part of like why I started the sticker business is I couldn't continue to do prison work full time because that was too much and that was making me miserable. But it wasn't about any one person. It was just I was over capacity. I was overextended. And so learning like, what do I actually have the capacity for? What can I take on? What can I hold? And not trying to be a superhero because I'm not. I'm a person.
Totally. That makes sense. So we only have so many like skill points, and like I train and practice different things because I just recognize it. Much like I'm never gonna learn another language because of just learning English better and further and more, I think would be more useful. I'm so specialized in certain ways that I'm just like, I have enough emotional intelligence to like be like, cool, like I'm a vaguely positive like person to be around, because I'm like, I just, at the end of the day, like if someone is in I don't really have that much experience with people in dire straits, but if people are in bad, I'm just like, okay, well, here are physical changes. Like what I've really realized is like physical changes to someone's surroundings, such as a shirt or just like going somewhere or food, or like those make real tangible changes on people's mental state. So those are the things that I do. And then I'm like, if I've exhausted all those and it's not like a family, like someone who's like, I'm living with very close to me, because then it's like, okay, then there's like an infinite well of like, okay, like patience. But for more or less, it's just like extended people. I'm just like, you have to draw the boundary. I mean, I have to draw the boundary somewhere and say, I'm going to be, even if it's 5% brought down, I'm going to be 5% less energizing for my partner. So then I'm bringing someone out. Like
sorry. But
no. Interrupt me,
it's
please.
a skill. It's a skill and a trade-off. Recognizing that I only have so much energy in a single given day. If I'm going around and doing tasks or going after jobs that I'm not actually practiced or skilled for, my margins for error, especially if the error is I mess myself up or I hurt other people in the process, is much larger. And so really knowing who I am really comes down to squaring away what are my skills, where am I adequate to actually show up for people who aren't adequate, and it's in a specific area or field. So like you're saying, a box or a sandbox is a control mechanism for creativity. It's a place where you get to learn to be creative, but I don't necessarily think that I'm doing myself a favor by saying, no, I'm not going to try something new. I just have to know where my actual boundary or limit is on the skill itself.
Yeah, boundaries and limits. I mean, so I just took Kratom. I've taken it for 8 years now, every day. It's really, in terms of bringing it back to willpower or like determination. What was it? What was the word?
Discipline?
Discipline. It's discipline's a really tricky thing for me, because do you essentially just do mental gymnastics of like, well, in the moment you're like, well, it's in the middle of December. Like the time, like there's never a good time to get off opiates or partial opioid agonists, but the time to definitely not get off them is in the middle of fucking winter in Oregon, because it's just like, what are you going to do? Sit inside all day? It's like, God. But in summer, I have gotten off for like a period of time, and I'm like, wow. And it has hooks. That's for definite sure. Like,
what's the difference?
Yeah, what is
in terms of season?
Well, no, like you said that you've like gotten off of it in spring before, and then you're like, oh wow. Like, what's the oh wow? Super
fascinating. I couldn't do all-nighters. I would wake up feeling more energized. Whereas currently, right now, I have like this is the weirdest. It's really, I've almost settled into it. This is the weirdest cycle I've ever been in. I sleep for probably 16 to 20 hours, and then I'm awake for 3 days straight, so 72 hours. And the first 10 hours are kind of like a takeoff, getting going, and then it's essentially 48 hours of productivity in a way that is genuinely filling the soul with purpose and joy. And like, I'm like me. Like, I'm like, that's how all this, none of this would have happened. My first bleached shirt came because I was sleepless, and I'm like, fuck it. So what? Like, because it's hard to take something that you spent money on and be like, I'm going to destroy it. Like, because that's what all, like, that's why I really think people haven't experimented with bleach enough to do this, is because people, like, everyone's like, oh, bleach damages clothing. I'm like, but what if there's a way to, like, get the effect? And then I'm like, and it's just been refining it. I'm like, that takes a level of sleeplessness, because there's one of Kanye's songs, Follow God. I'm not religious, but I'm like, there is some aspect of like, when you, like, the squirrel brain of just like, you know what's before you, and you don't even think about what you're doing. It's just like, you're on, like,
you're just congruent.
It's congruent, and it's like, that is the best feeling ever. And something that's really hard for me is to be like, well, it's 10 p.m. at night, and I'm really flowing. I should pause it, because I might not be there tomorrow, you know? So I was just like, okay, I'm really, like, things are going really well. Keep this going. Keep this rolling.
I think that's where there's the interplay between faith and discipline, and in the same way that you could look and consider the relationship between, like, justice and mercy, or judgment and mercy. So
those are concepts I've never even really considered. So this is fascinating that you're bringing this, like, up to, you know, up to the plate. I'm like,
well, considering just the decision to be empathetic at all is really the tipping of the scales on, am I going to pass judgment on somebody's situation, or am I going to show mercy on somebody's situation?
I think I showed you this.
I think there's an infinite amount of benefit of doubt you can give people, and like, there's practical things of essentially, it's like, yes, I do remember this.
Yeah.
There's never a reason to essentially assume, like, unless someone like ostensively says, I'm like, or like, no, I'm trying to fuck you over. Like, you see, my whole system is to screw you and leave you like for dead. Like, even if someone like cuts, like, just like does things where it's like, wow, I could really take that in a negative way. I'm like, that would not lead to long-term relationship. Long-term relationship is the foundation of all personal happiness and like monetary success. So it's whatever can be done to keep that string alive. And what that generally takes is like same mental gymnastics that keeps me taking the same substance allows me to be like, pretty understandable why they might do this thing that I think would be like, a lot of people, like, I've been in a lot of situations where it happens to like a group of like people, and I'm like a lot of people are like, fuck them, and I'm just like, I get it. like at the end of the day, it's like, you know, we all are capable of anything, given the right trance state.
Totally.
Absolutely.
We tell ourselves stories, and we build our lives around, you know, a stage or a idea of how we think life should be. And there are so many lives being lived. That's
what I've started really filming, has just kept me honest and like accountable in a really fascinating way, where it's like to the point where I'm like, I never even watch the tapes, because I'm like, just knowing it is being like essentially almost recording like all my life, is I'm like, well, cool. Like it's helped with the like it's helped really like that, make that final dot connection of the congruency. But it's not like I'm like, I have all the answers. I'm like, literally, I don't have the discipline to stop purchasing clothes. I spent $600 on clothes yesterday. I'm like, oh, I should not have done that. But I'm like, but hey, I really should have. I'm like, going back, I would have made the exact same decision. I'm like, it's well,
and you're gonna find out. Like, you're also gonna find out, and like you're a year in, and I mean, I think that's one of the things with business is there are those kind of markers where you start to be like, oh, okay, this is how I should be moving. Oh, I'm not going to move that way anymore. And then the instinct starts to refine itself into process. At least that's what has happened for me in the past, and like what I see people kind of playing
anytime
out.
I have a process, that means I'm not like some person like need to constantly innovate, but essentially I'm like every time I like take all the clothes and refold them, I'm like, I just try a different system of folding them, because I mean, I've spent literally hundreds of hours folding clothes.
Yeah, I bet.
I thought I had to find a way to enjoy it. And I'm like, but essentially I'm like, if I have a system, I'm like, oh, I do it that way, then I'm like there's always the potential for a better way to do everything. So I'm like, systems are something that I'm naturally like, if I recognize a system, I'm like, okay, well, how can I do something different? So
But do you build? Like, do you build off of a system, or do you, like, so with folding a bunch of different ways or organizing in different ways, have you found, like, oh, the way that I did it 10 times ago, I'm still thinking about and I liked that way? Like, do you ever go back to pieces of your systems?
Goals of level and square with clean ends. Like, but that's like an outcome that I like, that I desire, and then it's like I get to judge it based. I look at videos of early and it was so sloppy, and I used to, like, I mean, it was literally a mess.
And have you noticed how much faster and more efficient you are at folding now?
Sometimes I'm way slow. Like, when I'm going through those like videos that aren't time lapses videos, I'm like, sometimes it'll be like 1 hour and I fold like 10 pieces of clothes, but I'm enjoying it. Like, at the end of the day, all of this really is an endeavor of, like, I used to just buy like cheap Gildans and give them away, and now it's like it's just not like functional or sustainable. So I'm like, it really has remained a passion of, I'm just like, I never would have expected myself to be a clothes person at all. And I still don't really think I am. I'm a comfort person. That's a story I'm telling myself. Just as a way to fight against, I'm like, man, everyone's selling shit online. Like, everyone's selling shit all the time. I just don't want to be another figure who's like, just eat that on the internet, which has been really interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, off on a tangent.
Yeah.
Squirrel brain.
I feel that.
You get it.
Brain.
You're used to it. No, I'm kidding. I'm like, so you guys have lived together for how long now?
Almost 2 years. Or a year and a half?
Year and a half. Yeah, we've been together for almost 2 years, but we've lived together for a year and a half.
And do you work at home? Because it sounded like your jobs are.
Well, Althea does a lot of work from home, but during the day, I guess the best way to describe what I do is I'm a natural health consultant. So there's a natural grocery store in town that I work at that has a really big selection of different vitamins, minerals, herbals, tinctures, supplements, body care stuff. And the mainstay of it is homeopathically sourced or earth-sourced ingredients for better health. And honestly, I just try to navigate what people are looking to consume and how they can make better choices about their daily, ingestion.
You are consuming the input of the people. Like, I guess that's a great way of phrasing how I think about it. When you spend a lot of time around pessimistic, not even just like negative or sad, pessimistic, very specifically, when I think of like empathy is evil, pessimistic people, you try to use empathy to get you to also be pessimistic. Like, and angry people try to get you to also be angry. Empathy is just a tool. Really, it's like I'm using it as a knee-jerk phrase to just make people aware of the fact that it's a tool, and a lot of the times it's being used to make you sad, upset, like
advertising almost.
Like the manipulation piece
yes,
of it.
People. A lot of people use it to manipulate others.
Yeah.
Seemingly knowingly, of just
I guess,
knowing that they can emotionally hit a resonance.
So I think of that as not an issue with empathy itself. I think of that as, because there's a whole handful of relational tools, right? Like active listening, empathic listening, unconditional positive regard. Like, there are all kinds of relational tools that we use. And I guess, so, like, yes, empathy can be used, like, a tool that can be used for bad. And I think of the problem, I think of the problem as being like just generally relational fuckery, and not actually that like empathy is the problem. It's like, what are people up to?
Empathy is the thing you have control over, of like, am I emotionally going to like,
I don't
let
think
this
people
person
necessarily have control over empathy. You can develop control. It's a skill.
It's a skill.
It's a skill and a tool, just like anything else. So
I guess
and I
control is
guess
an
that's what
awareness
I'm.
that someone's starting to emotionally like it's starting to get you in that way. It's like, like how metronomes,
Like, you're starting to be affected.
It's
by
like,
something.
and then you're starting to sync up, and you're like, I have to leave the situation, or else I'm going to be in sync with that. I don't want to be angry about that.
But remember that you can be affected by somebody, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's empathy that you're experiencing.
Yeah. People very rarely have really cogent points. And if they do, then I do want to know it. Like, if someone has rationale for why I should stop doing something or dislike someone, but I'm like, people often rely on emotion. Like, people don't have specifics. People don't have the data. Like,
Sure,
I'm
like that they're just being emotional about something.
Yeah,
everyone hates Kanye based on emotion.
And it's a layer of understanding. And I think contextually, like, we can get to deeper layers of understanding, listening, and I guess at the end of the day, better relationships with other people.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to break through an emotional barrier, and I think that starts with, recognizing I have a choice to make here, and I have to resonate with them a little bit. And not every single person is going to, overpower my source energy and then bring me down. And if I'm well practiced enough and I'm disciplined enough, if I know what I'm up to, I actually can bring people up too.
Totally.
Like, so
Yeah.
it's a matter of just existing, and knowing that everyone else is existing too. And I don't have a choice in all of that. I'm going to be here either way.
Mm-hmm. What a crazy life this is. Like, just a crazy time.
It really is.
It just, like, something I've been coming back to is how grateful I am that I have developed. Like, earlier you mentioned developing. The skills you've developed are something you can kind of stand on as you're, like, who you are.
Right.
Yeah. And we all have specialized skills. I'm trying to think of, like, if I was 18 or essentially, like, imagine restarting from scratch. Like, what industry would I even start in with AI and just, like, the way the world's shaping? They would all seem very hopeless. I'm like, well, even lawyers and, like everything's up for grabs. I'm like, I'm happy with how far I am in, but I'm like, and really close is just my hedge against AI. I'm like, like, AI can't do this. So it's my way of just getting physical. But I'm like, man, and physical, there's no real money in it for most people until you get to a certain scale.
Right.
So it's like everyone's going to tech because that's how you scale quickly. But that's being the first thing that's gone away. So I'm just like, man, I'm just grateful I'm this far. But I'm like, it's daunting to think of just like the world that's ahead of us.
That's something that we were actually talking about at dinner the other night with some of our elders. And Althea's grandpa was telling a story about his first experience with Chat GBT or Chat AI, and he
ThinkBot.
himself, right, ThinkBot. He himself is a writer.
I don't know.
And so he himself is a writer, and so he spends a lot of time analyzing and revising different forms of prose, metaphor, you name it, like literary style, literary.
Yeah.
And this person shows him, well, let's just...
I mean, it's a small book. I wrote a book and a screenplay. I really, 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 really deeply enjoy putting words together.
Right. And his buddy goes, well, let's just put some of it into this chat AI bot and then tell it to analyze what it says. And Althea's grandfather goes, this scared me because it was able to lay out a plethora of information in a matter of seconds that I would have taken months to, kind of bring together and put and source. And
I like the way you're going for that word. I'm like, totally.
Like if I was to very seriously try and put together a piece of work with my own writing and research skills, it would take a lot of time for me to do that. And so it's really terrifying to see that AI is capable of combining different sources of ideas and then creating an analysis around it.
Yeah. But it really, I'm just curious your thoughts. It doesn't seem to have the humanity. Like, it does seem like the plastic of the internet. Like, it just seems often like it's missing that, like, why would someone make that choice? Like, that's what fascinates me when I'm reading something. I'm like, that's interesting. Is like AI doesn't have a lot of those in it. It's a lot of,
I think it doesn't.
It has a lot of systems.
Well, I think the AI that we're seeing isn't the only AI that exists, right? Like, there's much more advanced AI that we don't get to see. And so I think that, as far as I know, I think you're right at the moment, but I don't anticipate that that's going to be correct for long. And because I mean, AI, you think
the human spark, you could think that could be recreated?
I do, because we created AI. Like, AI is a child of humans, and it is a program that is based on the analysis of an incredible amount of human information, like human created and generated information. And so, like, it's only going to get a better and better sense of humans and like what makes that
I'm curious if it will make that, because no amount of like data collection or data, like having allows me to think in a different like paradigm of it. Like really,
But
it
you're
seems like the
not-
more data I have, the more entrenched I get. It seems like.
But you're not a controlled algorithm.
Yeah. I guess I may have like
Like
gotten
you're an
lost.
organic algorithm.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what I almost think. Like, if God does exist, that is what God is that like spark of like, oh, maybe I should bleach all the things that I've like I'm like, or just real like essentially just like some movies like yeah.
And I think that's really the crux of it all is when people go, oh wow, this AI is so amazing and fascinating. What people tend to forget is that the results that the AI is providing to us is literally just like a mirror image of a projection
Something
of all
that's
of
been
the
done.
of all of human work. And so when we really consider like breaking the curse or breaking the spell that we have of this simulated AI reality, is recognizing that they can sell us an image and it can be based on the reality that we want to have, but at the end of the day, it's not actually something that's real or something that everyone's experiencing.
I got a little lost there, but what I keyed into is you were saying it's a reflection of all of like humanity and all that's been done, which is kind of like the core of crux of what I'm saying is like what makes human like essence special is we're not doing something that's been done. Like when you read something or like there's a movie that comes out, it's like wow, like Reservoir Dogs, it's just like a bank robbery, but it doesn't even show the bank robbery. It's like,
But then, except that, at least in my experience, most things aren't original completely. Like, because you can look at Reservoir Dogs, and if you study it, you can see influences, and you can see homage, and you can see shots that have been done. You know, like,
it doesn't have to all be new, but like there's one, there can be like a new idea that is omnipresent throughout all of it. Like it
Right.
impacts all of it. And I'm just yet to see it. And like I understand that I played StarCraft a lot my whole life, and it developed systems that like weren't in the pro. Like the pro players weren't doing these things. So I understand that it has the capacity to develop its own like evolutionary of thoughts, but I'm like much like you said, it's not AI that we get to interact with. The AI that we get to interact with is just like it's just like an idiot box of it's just like, well, here's what's been done before, and here's the like professional,
Right,
and it's just like that's all of what I want less of in
It's-
life. I want less like
It's not being
Creative.
inspirative,
Yes.
or
but again,
creative,
I think
it's
you
regurgitating.
yes,
right,
yes,
but I think you have to think about who is programming the AI that we have access to, and what do they want us to do with it. And I think exactly what you have talked about is like, no, the powers that be probably don't want you to stay up for 3 days straight.
No,
and they
they
probably don't want you to, be using kratom, and they probably don't want you, like, there are all of these like metrics of what we are supposed to be doing and like what is ideal for us to be doing to serve the interests that are not our interests, right? And so I think that that's another aspect of the AI is like I don't believe for a second that what we have access to is actually a reflection of what exists with AI, and I'm not going to be fooled that just because we're offered something that's flat and kind of like trying to push me towards conformity, I don't believe for a second that there isn't something different that exists that we just don't have access to.
yeah. I mean, the one that could tell you what's like the AI can't tell you what's talked about. It can't make porn. It can't tell you how to make napalm. Like there's like things I'm like that'd be really cool. Like, I mean, if you could ask it anything and it would do its best, like, oh, you mix gasoline and tar, and that makes like fire that sticks. I'm like, I've always wondered that. And like I played COD a million times, throwing Molotov. I'm like, how does that work? I'm like, God, I'd love to make one in real life, harmlessly, like throw it on concrete, but just see what it actually looks like. That'd be a joy, but it's like, it's like dangerous. I'm like, God,
You're on a list.
Yeah, you're on a slippery slope.
I'm happy to be on the list. I want to be on the list. Something you mentioned is that like, oh, the powers that be. I'm like, the more I've ever dealt with larger organizations, the government, or any controlling figure, like they're people who have never considered not sleeping isn't bad. Like something, and I've said it a couple times on the show, but like I'm curious your thoughts on it because you two are pretty receptive people. A lot of people are like, Tiger, no, you should sleep. It's really fascinating. So I appreciate you two for just being open-minded.
Yeah.
But essentially, when you think of not sleeping, it's like, oh my God, your brain's not doing its system. You're getting a buildup of Alzheimer's. You're going to get Alzheimer's. Those are all based on studies of people who have sleep deprivation because of stress. So what if the sleep deprivation is happening in absence of stress? Like if stress isn't the cause of a lack of sleep. Almost unanimously, people can conflate not sleeping with being stressed, laying in bed, or like not like not like so joyous and like, oh my God, I have a vision for how this can all come together. I just gotta keep pushing it further. That I'm like, I just don't think it's genuinely been researched in a way that I can like respect.
I mean, I'm not so. I don't know what kind of. I'm not familiar with studies on mania, but I imagine that they have done studies that are looking at like people that experience periods of mania where they don't sleep for several days at a time, because that is a really common trait of mania, right?
But there's a loss of reality, like attachment to reality. So imagine that.
No, for sure. Like, and I'm not accusing you of mania. But I guess I'm just saying. Well, I guess I have
mania is a hell of a drug. That's another one of my screen friends. I'm like harnessing true. Like that's hypo, true. Like just under a level where you're still connected with reality, still based, but you have to think irrationally positive if you're gonna try. Like I'm like, I have hopes that me and Kanye are going to, like, I would at least, like, even if I don't talk to him directly, I would talk to his design team in the next year. Like that's a whole, like, I mean, talking like that sounds crazy. You'd have to be crazy, but I'm like,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Just, small world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I couldn't begin to say what the health implications are for choosing not to sleep.
You two are special in that way. Almost
well,
everyone does.
Well, I mean, people make all kinds of crazy choices every single day, and we don't even consider the greater implications of it. And so it's quite reasonable to consider that a lot of the greater geniuses throughout history probably took a lot of sleepless nights, days, weeks in the pursuit of what made them passionate. And
absolutely.
Going to sleep feels like I'd just be like my future self would be like, why the fuck did you not just like
but also,
take the vision while I was
except
there?
Also at the beginning you said if you could sleep for a month straight, that would feel really good. And so I think like the one thing I would say, I like Jurell, I don't know what the health implications are. I haven't tried what you're doing. I don't want to.
I really respect that you two just be like, if you don't have information, you guys are just like, not a lot of people do that. A lot of people like being like experts on everything. Which is
I know, but that's also, I mean, that's where I'll shit on people being emotional is like, I think that's unaccountable. Like, I can come up with some judgments, but they're going to literally be based on my own base judgments that, like, I don't know what your experience is. I mean, I know what your experience is insofar as you've told me, and you've shared a bit about it, and it sounds like, you're not...
I have a lot of fun. No,
well, you do have a lot of fun, and you're really passionate about what you're doing, and you're also, like, you showed me your tracker from last year that was like, wow, you were really paying attention to what you were up to, and I'm assuming you weren't lying to yourself when you're inputting information. If you are, like, that's your prerogative. But...
That'd be a whole...
No, but that would be... Right, but that also would not be in touch with reality, right? Like... But we also do that shit. Like when I used to make a calendar and then I would like overfill it and I did half of what I put on there. It's like, okay, I wasn't in touch with reality, right? And do I actually come back to it and recognize I just did half of what I planned to, right? Like, so I think that idea of like what it means to be in touch with reality for somebody else, like that you have to sleep a certain amount in order to be healthy or well or like in touch with reality. I don't know. And so I mean that's what I would say about it. But the piece about stress and like the studies on people not sleeping mostly being like people are not sleeping because of stress, I think remembering too that stress comes in a lot of different forms and just I mean I like the first thing that I think of is like, how is it stressing your system though? Or is it causing stress to your system?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what are the long-term, long-term or even short-term implications of the stress that your system is experiencing because you don't have any.
I've taken a blood test once a year, but I would love to do a more like comprehensive metabolic like panel like once every month, like because I've done this for about a year now. Up until a year ago, if I stayed up one night, I'm like, okay, I gotta go to sleep. And then at a certain point, it got broken because of work. I stayed up for 7 days straight.
Whoa!
It was because it was in the middle. It was December. It was about a year and 2 weeks ago. It was the end of a massive contract, the biggest contract that like we had. and then the house got sold, so we were moving. So it was just this big conglomeration of just like, oh, a lot of stuff's got to get done, you know? And it's like, we fulfilled the contract, we moved successfully, and it's like, it all worked out. But then having been awake for 7 days straight and just realizing, or just essentially because I did the habit tracker because I'm like, I started to question reality. I'm like, it's really easy to tell myself like, oh, I'm happy. But I'm like tracking every day, like my physical feeling, my mood, my social, like everything. It's like, looking back, I'm like, it was weirdly correlated to if I was like had been up for a night, like people would call back, like people who like connections would happen, like everything was better in a way which I'm like, I'm very accurately, like sometimes it wasn't, sometimes like one night I was awake for 2 days. I had a chair essentially set up where like I'd sit back, or like I did it once. I sat back and I like leaned back and my head hit like the thing, and I'm like, oh, that's not a fun time. And I was like, okay, like being sleeplessness, like for a long time I just like dance around because like we have HomePods, we have music going all the time. I was definitely just like you know, just like there's definitely a level of looseness with reality with sleeplessness, but I feel like I really got a dial on the bitch now. I'm like, okay, like, you know, it's fascinating to just see your limits in life. I like testing limits. Primarily my own. And I have a fundamental distrust for the system because of just the fact that people say salt's unhealthy. I think you could eat a tablespoon of salt and be healthy, like healthier than eating less. And people put sunscreen. Like I've just been around people telling me to put sunscreen on. I'm like that causes like cancer rates are increasing. And it's like, or skin cancer rates specifically are increasing. I'm like, clearly it's not like the mechanism that's helping. And people really espouse these things that are based on like fraudulent studies and stuff.
No, it's quite true. And considering a lot of the clinical reading that I'm doing just to support being able to show up at my job and be confident with saying or saying like, yeah, this is what it does, this is what it is. Recognizing like, well, how does the body actually work? And there are so many different really, really basic common sense things that like, wow, we don't even consider it. Like quite literally, if you wouldn't put it in your mouth and enjoy it, you probably shouldn't rub it on your skin.
Or inhale it.
Or inhale it, right.
You wouldn't eat, yeah, absolutely. Right. There's also, you bring up a really interesting point, which is the, you've heard of Joe Dispenza ever? Of essentially the placebo effect of, they had some people and they gave an actual knee surgery to some of the people. The other people they put under and they did an incision and they healed the same, right? Like there's some level of metaphysical reality which your thoughts really do truly impact your lived experience beyond rational science.
Psychosomatic,
you know?
right? And we have a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means for something to be psychosomatic in our culture, because we've, like, the medical industrial complex has basically said, oh, psychosomatic is that you're making something up and it's not actually really happening. Yeah. But psychosomatic is purely the connection between your mind and your body, and that it's all connected.
Right now I am emoting. Like, I'm literally emoting in this room, and you're telling me what I'm feeling and experiencing isn't real. And so that's sometimes like when people
sometimes people experience things that aren't real, like, or it could be based on faulty information, which I would judge as
absolutely. You know, and that's where I think psychoanalysis really gets its actual fame, because if we really think about giving away our authority and like for yourself, if you were to say, okay, it's true, there's only 24 hours in a day, and if I get anything less than 6 hours of sleep in a 24-hour cycle, I'll start to lose my mind. Right? And so if you allow yourself to give that authority away to somebody with a license or a psychoanalysis degree, and then they say, right, now they have the reins on your soul, and they can put you on drugs, they can tell other authority entities that you don't have control of your own body or your own mind. And really the entire instance of it all starts with being like, okay, well, where am I going to take authority of myself, my thoughts, my actions? Because we can play psychodramas out all of the time.
A lot of this stems from the fact that when I was like 21, I started making my own DMT and taking a lot of it. And then my first big success in life, someone flew me to LA. I have a photo with Joe Rogan. I'm in a Vice article based on, and all this podcast gear is literally purchased. Someone on Reddit was just like, oh my God, he discovered DMT. I'm like, I discovered DMT. I'd fly down and interview you. And he gave me 10 grand. Never met him, based on a Reddit comment.
Cool.
And so I'm like, okay, so DMT seems to be correlated with positive. And really, there are some studies that are like upregulates serotonergic. Like, that's where it gets vague because it's based on ayahuasca, which is mixed with an MAOI. Who know? Like, it's hard to parsec them apart because not a lot of people take DMT. It's almost like anti-tolerance in the sense that a lot of people, it's really intense for, but because I don't have visuals, it's not as intense. It's more or less like, I just thoughts that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So, and I haven't had DMT in like probably a year now, but there was a period of time where it was like, I might be the person who was taking the most DMT in that year. It was like, because I'm like, it's really, really cheap, inexpensive, and all the ingredients are free, and it's not like super like, it's essentially just like a psychedelic that lasts 15 minutes. Imagine you could take 5 grams of mushrooms, but it only lasts 2 minutes. Like, you know, like imagine you had a safety button. You didn't have to worry about eating and going to the bathroom and showering while you're on it. Because that's, I'm like, I've never taken more than like 3 grams of mushrooms, and even then I was like, did not like, too intense for me. But it's like DMT, I'm like, oh, you really get to go all the way up the elevator and back down. And it's like, it was really fast. And then at that point, I was just like, oh, okay, life's what you make of it. But it's still possible to lose hope, essentially, of just, you know, like that's the weird part of it. It's like, man, it's hard to like really fight reality when it's like day in and day out.
Yeah.
Faith and discipline.
Yeah.
Like really keeping your eye on the goal of what it is and then interweaving that daily praxis in and around what that goal is.
And I'm not a person who has goals. And I also don't fill up calendars. But
guess
I
goal-
cheat myself in other ways. I'm
goal,
like, I'm going to make a
faith.
video and I don't make that, but I don't, yeah.
Because you have to pin your faith on something, right? Like you said,
It's
like
very vague. I have a very vague
I mean,
goal then.
okay, think about like
I want to be best friends with Kanye.
exactly. And
I'm
so
honest with
that's-
myself enough to say it.
And so that's faith, and it gets pinned in a place where you can launch your energy into a place where you get momentum or you gain speed,
yes.
right?
That is, man, you were dialing, that is the exact thing that is like, that is the propeller of everything good in life, in my estimation.
So what I found works best for myself, especially when I'm trying to get the reins on how do I get control of basically my discipline, where do I find that? And it was a matter of really honing in on, well, where is my faith lie? And how do I articulate that back to like the little tiny baby steps? And then I can really wind myself up or gain momentum where I can actually build into a catharsis. And it's reached points where I've finished a whole day of training and I've completed my tasks for the day, and I can sit down and feel really, really full and complete and almost emotional because I'm like, wow, this was, day number 42 of me actually taking account and remembering, why do I do this? Oh yeah, this is why I'm doing this. And thank you for showing up. And that's like being in the conversation with myself, or like I'm saying, playing the table tennis against my spirit.
It's like another muscle, like an emotional kind of like dealing with people is just your own, like seeing that you could do something for 40 days would probably build up the fact of like, hey, if you set your mind to something, you like in any second of like, oh, I may stop doing it, you can override it and see the longer term. Like that's a skill I think I had a lot when I've been really experimenting with not having. I've just essentially trusting that in any given second, my decision making and value systems is like I will always make better choices with more information. I have more information and I'm a better judge of my current state like later. But that disallows almost all discipline in terms of like obviously getting off a substance, nicotine too. It's like, but then it's like I have the discipline to like do this for like 20 hours straight for 6 months straight. But it doesn't feel like discipline. It feels like.
But that's will.
Well, right.
Like
And,
that's your-
and there's
that's-
your
will.
That's
there's your
willpower.
will, and then there's what's the word that I'm trying to look for? There's pathologizing. We can make decisions and we can do things that go against our greater faith, our greater vision, and then we can start spiraling because we pathologized that one decision. Or we can say, hey, you know what? 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forwards, 3 steps back. But like, what was the original intent? And like, let's get back to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because
Pivoting is also
it's
important.
easy to spiral.
Like taking cues from reality and saying, that was a wrong. I was gonna make a company. Like I was gonna like be like, I'm gonna brand this and I'm gonna screen print it. I'm like, what a stupid ass thing that everyone's like, you should like I did it. Like I essentially a lot of the clothes that like I'm like, I don't know what to do with this are ones that I bought in attempt to do it. Like I'm like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Like I do really enjoy this and it's a way of getting outside. I should do it. And I'm like, oh, it was like everything wrong was just setting my attuning my North Star to like what a lot of people were telling me. So when it was one step forward, two steps back, I just like stopping and being like, probably the wrong direction. That's not always the case, but generally I'm very much so with life of like, ooh, that's not like going easy. It's not easy to like learn or develop, or like it takes a lot of discipline for me to spend an hour doing this. I'm like, usually I just take it as like a sign from the universe that's like, that's probably not what you should be doing at any given moment. It's not universal. Like when you're doing taxes, you gotta just
it sucks.
Dial it in, you know? Yeah. I hear you can just guess, and I might play around with that. You know, depending on how busy I get, I might just wing nut it, you know, and be like, well, I mean, call me on it, you know? I'm gone. I'm going to do no.
Yeah, living dangerously.
But yeah, life's, what was most impactful? Because we've actually gone like an hour and a half. Like most podcasts, I'm like, cut an hour, I'm like, get the fuck out of my house. But like, this is an hour and a half. Like, this has been a joy having you two here.
We can talk.
But I'm mostly concerned about batteries and stuff.
Yeah.
But I really, to top it all off, I want to, like, what has been impactful in developing the thought processes that, like, who you are? You're clearly two people who not everyone thinks the way you do. You two are exceptional in some unique ways. What has been like, formative? What's been formative in your psyche and mental kind of?
Go for it, Althea.
Man, what has been formative? I mean, darkness. Like the dungeon's been formative for me.
Oh, not literal darkness.
Well, I mean,
grief.
Yeah, grief
and sadness,
pain, sadness. I mean, for me, like, I think I'm like a kind of inside out, upside down from where you're at with empathy, where one of the things I discovered about myself pretty young is that if I'm not actively living my life in a like community minded kind of justice minded way, that's when I get depressed. Like that's when I feel.
And I can't be those two things without empathetically getting in, like just
totally.
Emotionally.
But like I
have
have to be involved somehow. Like I have to be doing something, and it's not like I have to be involved in everything, but like I have to be taking some level of personal responsibility for the world that I live in order to be okay.
You can't litter and just be like, that's another person. Like, no.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
You gotta live your life right.
Litter. Yeah. No, right. But that right being like what is right, and that is subjective, and like it's super subjective. So there's that piece of it for me that like darkness was deeply impactful. My mom was deeply impactful. She's like the opposite of darkness. She's an artist, just fantastic. But so like love, the contrast of like the spectrum, right? Like the spectrum of things can be really dark and things can be really beautiful, and I think that's where joy lives, is like at the threshold of that.
I could absolutely,
those are
there's a lot of thoughts. I'll digest them when I see you next. I'll have a more formed thought on that.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's where joy lives, is in like feeling, like in being alive, in connecting and relating,
in the moment,
and I think that I mean, I know that joy can exist in really dark places. And I've seen it so much. And I've seen how you can stoke a fire when it doesn't seem like you have any materials. So that's been really formative for me.
You just can't be around wardens of like, don't joke about that. Like, that's like the one thing. It's like, you got to be able to, like, nothing's off the table to joke about. Then you can have some light in the darkness. Then there's definitely like, you know, like you have humor, at least is how I find joy.
For sure.
In the
for
darkness.
Sure. No, absolutely. I mean, you have to be able to show up with what's true and real. And sometimes it's really funny. Yeah.
It's just, I'm not going to go that direction. Anyways, formative for you.
So, like I was saying at the beginning when we started talking, my thought process and my idea on practice or a praxis of being has really formed within the last 2 or 3 years.
Praxis.
And, praxis as in like an applied knowledge of being.
I like that word then. It sounded like practice, like mental practice.
Yeah,
No,
well,
it's
where
like
practice and
applied
theory,
practice?
where practice and theory meet.
When they-
Yeah, so where
Yeah.
you've thought about something and then you practice the thing with
So-
integrity to the idea.
Right. So
Love it.
Right.
So
what
all of
you're-
life is a praxis.
Right. What you're doing
be.
with cotton is a praxis. So you're creating a praxis around your art.
It's a trance. Not my
Right.
art. I have no control over the designs of any of it. That's
Call-
the joy of
But
it, and
you're
that's
the
why
vessel.
I enjoy it.
But
Like,
you
you're
are
I'm
the
a
vessel.
vessel.
bringing it to life,
Yes.
yeah.
Call it what you will.
Yes, I'm a
Like,
vessel.
And so for me, what was been most formative is recognizing that I actually need to take accountability for myself, and the best way that I found to do that is to read and write and conceptualize what the spirit is in relation to the whole world around me, and so there are non-physical sensations and feelings that I'm having all of the time, and in the same way that we're fascinated by magnets.
Magnets. I love
Like
magnets.
I think thoughts and feelings and emotions are also magnetic vibrations, and so
Agree.
existing in the world is really a practice in vibrating. And
So what was formative in starting that path, I guess?
sure,
Like, you answered. You
it was
essentially
very
just, like,
specifically. It was very specifically the practice of learning to read and write. Like coming back to taking accountability for myself is okay. What am I up to? Writes it down, and then taking account. Did I actually do what I said I was going to be up to?
So what started that? I'm just digging deeper. But no, but like genuinely, like a lot of what you're describing is the way in which you're going about life. Which I'm curious, like, was there like a person or a night? Like, what was the spark for this entire direction?
It was an immense amount of suffering towards the tail end of a bunch of life choices. So I tried starting a business. I took out debt in order to make the business go, and it only took a year and a half to recognize that my faith was fueled by greed, and my aspirations were held up in a relationship where we weren't actually meeting eye to eye. So it was like we want the same things, but we don't actually want to work together to get them, if that makes any sense. And so I was living a life where I was making myself ultimately really miserable, working for a company that didn't
care about you at
didn't
all.
care about me. It
Except
was
for some praise,
right. And then
which we eat up. Everyone's so praise hungry in life. Like,
Yeah.
honest to God.
I mean,
like,
I want
how
to
often?
do a good
You two are
job.
wonderful people. You genuinely deserve praise. You're spectacular. Like, think. Like,
but
I
I want to
genuinely.
be. I want to do a good job.
Yeah, I know. Seriously. Yeah, you're clear thinkers. You're a joy to be around. You're positive. Like, it's nice.
Thanks,
it's just
Tiger.
I don't have
Thank
to
you,
like.
Tiger.
There's no like eggshells. Like, you guys are just joyful people. Pleasure to be around people like that. So like it just brought up a good point of I'm like, oh yeah, like it's always good to just tell people.
Thank you, Tiger.
Yeah. This has been a joy. Do either? I mean, it'd just be fun to have you guys. Do you live far away or?
We live across
we live on the
town,
other side of the
but-
river.
Across the pond.
Yeah.
But
But this is his old stomping grounds.
yeah, I went to Cal Young Middle School, so
Cool.
yeah.
I love it.
It was like, oh wow, these are my old streets.
Right. We walk to the school and then we walk one street over. That's where all the doves are. Did you guys see anywhere? Did I show you a bunch of dove photos? Okay. Well, if you guys want to come during the day, not at night, there's been these doves that we've been like playing with, and essentially,
Cool.
yeah. I mean, there's probably like 30 of them, like. So we've just been like going and taking a bunch of fun photos, and really, but even besides like the photos, like which cheapens it all, like just sitting and watching
Yeah.
pigeons for like 5-10 minutes, it's like fire. It's like so joyful. I never, much like clothing, where I was like that came out of left fucking field.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. So if you guys want to come they leave at probably like noon to 2 or something.
Cool.
They're there kind of like right around 11 noon, like. They're primo.
Then we'll
Awesome.
invite you to look at the geese at the Catholic school up the street.
I
Yeah.
go see some
Yeah.
bigger birds. I'm like, I like
yeah.
the pigeons because they don't want they're not gonna ever harm you. They're really clean. Like there's not just poop on the ground. Like they're like, and they make these fun sounds. Like, I just love every single thing about them. And they're in these big groups, and it's like, oh, I love them. But
so
I would
cool.
try. I would give geese a try.
I have a giant Canada goose tattoo on my arm. They're like, I love geese so much. I love geese so much, but I
Cool.
love birds so much. Especially when they're like you're describing, they're like congregating and chilling.
It's cool to
So
see. I'm
good.
just like, oh man, they have a really like an understand. It's like bees but bigger. Like I'm
Yeah.
like bees, I can't really like look down and like see the way they're interacting. Like I trust they are, but I'm like birds, you can kind of see them. Like it's really like pigeons of all things. Like we'll like so subtly just be like, get away from this, and then they're all friends. Oh, I really. Yeah, up until this is all a month ago. I've never really been an appreciator of birds until about a month ago,
Cool.
and now I'm like, they're my favorite animal. Like dogs, cats, who
Up
cares?
and
I
down.
literally couldn't care less. Pigeons, doves.
Cool.
You and Mike Tyson would get along.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, literally, I didn't even like. It was funny. I had multiple things.
Nice.
Kanye has dove because Dove Charney's the. I don't know why he has doves, but Kanye has doves on a lot of things.
Okay.
And I had these before we saw the pigeons across the street, and I was just standing there. I'm like, wow, these are so fun. I'm like, oh my god, like it was just funny that I was like surrounding myself with doves, then I got to see real doves.
Yeah. Nice.
Amazing.
But yes, this has been a joy. I'm just gonna probably edit it together and have this out
Cool.
tonight. Thank you both for coming on.
Cool. Thanks
Yeah,
for having us.
Thanks a lot, Tiger.
Righteous.
This was great.
All right, lots of love. And I want to cue it one more time. Where'd that sucker go? That was a lot of fun.